I had first been working with a therapist, and so when he mentioned the possibility of using LSD, I immediately was like, nope, not going to do it. I followed the rules. I grew up in central Alberta, and so it was all about following the normal path, the accepted path. And so came from fairly traditional family background, achieved in school, did all the right things, checked all the boxes. But along the way, I didn't really have a sense of who I was. I was always looking external to figure out, what was the mark of success or what was the achievement. And so that became just how I lived my life. And so I got to a place where I had lots of the boxes checked. I was successful in my career. I had a family, I had a house, I had children, I had a dog, I had a spouse, I had everything that I was supposed to. And yet I was feeling really disconnected from myself. And I knew that there had to be more. And so I think it was those early days of feeling numb, feeling disconnected from self, and just recognizing something wasn't right. So that kind of set me on a path, and then psychedelics found me. I grew up in the era of just saying no to drugs and the commercial with the egg that we all reference. And so drugs was always bad. Drugs was something that other people did. And I had a really narrowed view of psychedelic, of drugs in general. So when I started hearing more buzz, it really started with Michael Pollan's book, which is, a good entry point for the average Joe, which I considered myself at that time. And so it just sparked a curiosity of maybe there's something more here. And I think that coincided with this desire, this longing. There's got to be something more in my life. This just can't be it. So I think that's where it started. And really, Michael Pollan is pretty above board kind of person, his reputation and his credentials up until that point. It doesn't come kind of more straight laced than that. So I think he legitimized some curiosity for me. And then I just started being open to the process. I was curious to explore more and transform the sense of, I call it fragmentation or disconnection. And so feeling that I wasn't a whole piece of a person or a whole being, but everything wasn't together, it was fragmented. So recognizing, reading into psychedelics about how they're mind expanding, manifesting, just felt like a really good opportunity to explore more about what was on the other side of my reality, of what I knew now. I had first been working with a therapist, and so when he mentioned the possibility of using LSD, I immediately was like, nope, not going to do it because of all the bad stories or the things that I heard from the 60s and losing my mind. And so I was initially really resistant. But then there was something else. There was a curiosity of what if? And so that's where it really started to peak. I think I was at that point really wanting to have an experience of letting go, surrendering this container, this kind of free prison that I found myself, whether it was my mind or my patterns. I had, been doing some work and uncovered some traumas that I wasn't aware of in my history, which really rocked everything for me. Started bringing up new sensations in my body and new memories and experiences, but it also helped to set me free in a lot of ways of understanding that things finally made sense. Something deeper was being tapped into. And so that's what I was hoping with the LSD experience, is to find that deeper space or just freedom from the prison of my mind, of my body, and what was on the other side. And up until that point, I wasn't able to surrender fully. There was always a piece of me wanting to be in control and wanting, out of fear, to prevent myself from letting go. So the LSD experience for me was an opportunity to surrender to that. And so, interestingly enough, I consumed the medicine and immediately it tasted familiar. And there was just an expansive, beautiful, like I know this. This is familiar to me, even though I've never done it before. And for most people who have done LSD, there is no taste, but there was a taste, and it was an ancestral taste to it right off the bat. It was I've been here before, and that's helped me settle. So the initial stages, phases of that journey was all about seeing what was on the other side of this reality. And so I really wanted to surrender from my body, from my edges, from my mind, and just be expansive. And so that's exactly what happened. And I was able to let go in this trusted container that I had created or co created with a therapist. It took me to this other side of I call it source. And it was this universal consciousness, collective consciousness. There was commingling of different ancestries, there was Asian music, indigenous music, South American music, and it was just beautiful and expansive. And it felt like I was big, really, like just no form, but it was so expansive in my mind and my heart and my feelings. And then it started kind of progressed into coming back into this reality. And it was interesting because it was a loop of an infinity sign. So it would go into this other space and then kind of cycle back to the reality space. And I did that, it felt like hours, but it was really tapping into what was on the other side. And every time I went into that other side, there was a piece of knowing and a piece of understanding that was being delivered or spoken to me about why we need to live on this side, why we have bodies, why we have containers, and why we have edges. And so that was a real big part of that journey, is the edges that we find ourselves in and why. And we need to be contained in some ways to be able to understand reality. All of that experience of having kind of what's on outside of my edges, but also knowing that I needed my edges, was a really important part of my process of learning how to let go and expand, but also come back to something else, come back to whole. That was pretty significant. And then it transitioned into kind of seeing the fragments and understanding why I fragmented in my soul and my psyche and my emotions, thoughts, even my physical body. And it all made perfect sense. It was all about survival, surviving everything that I had experienced up until that point. In those fragments, I could see it was almost like them separating, and I can see what was underneath. And I got to taste and feel into a truer me of my soul, my psyche, and my energy and spirit before all of these experiences. And so it really felt like I got to feel myself and meet myself in a very true, intimate way. And it was pure bliss and visceral and sensual. And it was just, again, familiar place of this is who I really am. And so for me, that was an important piece of my healing journey, is to work through the fragments to get to the underneath, to get to who I really am and my true nature and my true energy and soul, and let that come through. And so that's kind of where I, describe that sovereignty feeling, is being able to work through the fragments, come back together as a whole, and understand who I actually am outside of the stories, outside of the lessons, outside of the intergenerational trauma that's in my lineage, how that's been filtered. All the message about survival and people and experiences has been filtered through those lenses. And so I got to experience what was under those messages and what source, the divine feminine, the divine masculine, what they want for me, for us, for all humanity. And it was just the most expansive, beautiful experience. And so I felt meeting myself for the first time. And then with that, there's a sovereignty, because I broke free of all of these pieces, of all of these constraints. And having that taste, it's like, that's what I want. And so that's helped motivate me to continue this healing journey and work through really difficult journeys, and knowing kind of, I guess, a goal, if that makes sense, or of what that essence of what I'm trying to tap into, because that's truly who I am. For me, it was tapping into trueness, not letting the mind create these filters in my experiences, but really being able to see and tap into what's real, what's true. And then having tasted it or having felt it, it's almost like that's an anchor for me now, because that's where I can get to, I can experience again, not by taking medicine, but just remembering, recalling that experience, that it's in me. And so that's been how I've been working with it since then, is recognizing I've tapped into it, I've touched into those spaces, and it's inside of me. I don't need to go anywhere to find these experiences, but cultivate that openness, the expansiveness, the awareness, and change my behaviors, change my thoughts, change my patterns, and really be intentional. It's almost like once you've tasted that essence, you don't want to ever go back to being numb or sleep, or you just taste the vitality, the aliveness. And so that's been my motivation. Every time I journey, it's to connect to another piece, a deepening layer, and be able to work through the stuff, the layers, the fragments on top of what's truly me and truly my energy and essence of life and vitality, and how to cultivate that with other people and connection, and myself, connecting to myself. So for me, that's been the biggest takeaway, is shifting into this is accessible for me now. If I share, or if I focus my attention, focus my thoughts and my experiences, and practice that intentional way of being present, embodied, mindfulness, whatever practices, it's accessible to me now. First, it's to capture the story of essence of what you're doing here, because all of our journeys in our life and our experiences is made up of stories. That's how our brain understands information. So for me, it was important to capture the beginning, the middle, the end of this experience so that I can frame it in a story. And then the key takeaways of what do I want to take away? What do I want to extract from this experience to move forward with in an intentional way? So that included reflection and journaling, even like of an embodied space of feeling back into what that expansiveness was like, and recultivating that space in my mind and my body. So for me, it's integration is super important. I'm a therapist. So for me, integration is what we do with the lessons, the learnings, the experiences, and how we move forward with them. And if we don't have integration, I would have lost, if I didn't have integration, I would have lost the meaning of the experience, I believe. And so, really creating space to reflect on it, whether that was initially daily to reflect on how do I want this to stay present in my life, and then really looking at what do I need to change in my thoughts, in my relationships, in my patterns and my behaviors, so that I can start to cultivate that essence and that freedom and sovereignty on a daily basis. And I think that's where it becomes challenging, is because there's this disconnect in our society of the right path, or the what's going to get you successful, and then this longing that I had to be connected. And so for me, it was integrating both sides of how do I do this in a meaningful way that helped me live in a different way, live more connected with that essence and that source and the embodiment of it, the mindfulness, the presence, all of these words basically helping me see that there's a way forward through trauma, through some difficult experiences that I've had in my life. I can allow those fragments to drain away, drop away, and again find that core of who I was before and who I am now, and who I want to be moving forward is more important, is really cultivating this future focus of the expansive ways that I want to experience life. And I never want to go back to sleep again and be numb and disconnected. So there's motivation there. I want to keep integrating and keep this active energy alive in my body so that I never fall asleep and I never go back to how I was, but I feel like this propulsion forward, this momentum forward with such energy and vitality. And I think it's so nurturing, nourishing in my soul, my emotions, my mental health, everything. So I think it's a beautiful gift. Do your research. Find trusted people that can support you through this process, whether it's recreationally or therapeutically. There's enough of us out there that have experiences that can share, this is what to do, what not to do. But for me, it's been the most beautiful and most healing to do it in a therapeutic context, within a trusted therapist that I know he's done his work. And so he's been able to have a really safe space and presence in my life and I'm in my journeys that I can surrender, that I know that I'm in good hands. The advice I would offer is find that person for you. Always we're integrating the information. So find a trusted individual and integration. Those are my two pieces of advice.